Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. You are tuned in to Vintage and Stuff with your host, Drew Heifetz. Today I have Ross Schwartzman, aka DJ Ross 1, of the book Rap Tees, the author of Rap Tees, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Volume 1 is hard to get right now, but you can still find copies, and he recently released Volume 2, which you can get on raptees.us or in any F as in Frank location. So make sure you go grab the book if you're in Vancouver or Whistler or anywhere where we have a store, or grab one on his website. He's also a world-renowned DJ. Obviously, he's a rap t-shirt connoisseur collector. And it's a great chat. We talk about the book. We talk about his history in music. We talk about fly fishing. We talk about his friend, the wild squirrel. He has a friend that is a wild squirrel. But it is mainly a rap t-shirt episode. The phenomena of rap t-shirts. We get into all aspects of it. And how this book came to be. That is an archive of all the craziest shirts from the beginning of rap music till present day. So without further ado, let's just jump into the episode. This is the full version. You're getting it on the YouTube for free this time, so enjoy it. Thank you for tuning in, and make sure you sub to the channel. Ross, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
So, everybody knows you in the vintage community from your work with the book Rap Tees. You created essentially a encyclopedia, a reference guide for rap t-shirts for nerds, t-shirt nerds like me to enjoy, to study. So thank you for that, first of all.
You're welcome.
And I think these kind of books are very important for the vintage community. And I do think in some sense they build the community, because it puts all these things in one place. You can study it, you can learn it, you can then go out and find it potentially, right? So
yeah,
nice. Very cool.
Well, that was the point, I think, so that's great.
But you're into hip hop because you are a DJ, and obviously I want to there's all kinds of topics I want to get into on this conversation. Your life in rap music, how you created these books, your personal collection. But I'm going to kick it off with a guest question from O'Connor's Vintage. And he writes, if your house caught fire and you could only save one rap tee, which one are you saving?
It's a thought, trust me, when things are stored in various places, and you're always considering, storage and things like that. So you're always considering what if. I got a lot of stuff, and I don't even know if rap tees are the first thing I'm going for, but there's one bin that's kind of like early 80s and really, really special stuff that I'd probably throw that one out the window first before anything else, just because Nice. It's a lot of things that it's one of a kind stuff, and stuff that you can never replace and has historical significance. So there's one bin of kind of stuff like that would probably be my first, but there's a lot of stuff that I'd be reaching for. So
yeah, like what would be the thoughts? Like records first?
No, records last. Records are replaceable. there's like some art, photographs and things. I have a big, I collect a lot of stuff. So there's a lot of early hip hop flyers and just things of historical significance, basically, that if they were gone, it would be tragic,
Yeah,
on
totally.
a sort of a bigger scale. T-shirts, a lot of them aren't replaceable, but on the scale of not replaceable, there are some that are really not replaceable. And there's a few items that like belong to artists and things like that. It would be a mad dash. It would be really, really bad. It would be a really bad thing.
I think
So
we all think about that, like
yeah.
where our collections are stored. That kind of brings dry rot to mind, things that get eaten up by over time in your storage. You always got to kind of be checking these things and
Yep.
making sure your collections are
Moths.
safe.
Got to
Yeah.
check on the moths, the dry rot. I mean, in a weird way, it's kind of a impetus to let go of things eventually because you hope when you have collections that are like my collection, I think there's some historical significance. So I would hope it would end up somewhere where, there was an added level of protection in some way. So, it gets you thinking about that, where you'd
Have you
want to see
ever?
it.
Do you have any ideas for that in the future, like an exhibit or something of that
I'd
nature?
love to do an exhibit. I mean, it's hard. It's a lot of work to organize and just securing things. Now it's a little bit easier than, a couple of years ago where uh, I was just really worried about putting stuff up on the walls. But I'd like to do a big exhibit sometime. When I did the launch party, I, put like whatever 70 tees up on the wall in New York, which was cool. And it would make for a really great exhibit. And I think the collection as a whole makes for kind of a cool historical document, of
Yeah, totally.
hip hop, kind of tells the story. So yeah, thought
So,
crossed my
so
mind.
something about this topic I want to jump right into that's kind of everyone's on the top of most vintage dealers' minds is the value of rap tees currently, right? And for you, I'm imagining this stuff comes from your love for the music and your love for the culture. But now you have rap tees hitting insane values, right? The first question of this is do you think the book played a part in that? Did you ever think it would get to where it's currently at? And also, does your personal taste in what you love the most correlate to potentially what's valued in the market?
The book definitely played a role in the values. Even just like the term rap tees that I just kind of came up with just for like because I was collecting hip hop T-shirts and wanted to start an Instagram page.
Yeah.
I think even just making a name for it now, like you look at search that name on like a hashtag search, and it's like multiple millions of rap tees mentioned. So it's sort of become a way that even like like Grail will have like a rap tees section or like it's like listed under. And so that just started out as like me just doing an Instagram and trying to come up with a cool name for it. Like I own rap tee. I own the trademark for rap
Oh,
tees. Like rap
really?
tees is yeah,
Sick.
yeah, yeah. Rap tees has been mine. So it wasn't just like something I like latched onto. Like I came up with rap
Smart.
tees. Um, the value. I mean, I'm a collector. Everything I have done has come from the standpoint of being a collector since I was a kid, and I think I come from a long line of collectors in my family. My mom and my grandma, and so the value and the thought of selling has never been a part of why I collect. I'm aware of prices obviously because I'm buying. Um, and I'm aware of how rare this stuff is, and I know how hard it is to find, and I know what the value sort of like should be. And it's a tricky situation because the values went up for the wrong reason. Um, and a lot of that happened during this kind of like COVID craziness where it was sort of like a lot of new quote unquote dealers
Yeah.
a lot of sort of just kind of like middlemen type people who were just saw an opportunity. And it was just like this whole, I mean, it wasn't just t-shirts. It was like it was like NFTs and like penny stocks. And like there was a pump and dump thing going on.
Totally.
And it's sort of, in a weird way, it artificially inflated the values to a level where they shouldn't have been. But the value is actually higher than where it was getting pumped up to. It was just getting pumped in the wrong way by the wrong people. And so it's kind of, I think it's leveled out now and come back down probably because of that, at least a bit. It was
I
a
think
tricky
it has come
situation.
down, but I still think that like it never comes back down to where it was. It still has, because then people see where it was, and it's like, you know,
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, the money I just think kind of ruins everything good, always. So
yeah,
I've always
it's a
stayed
fair
out of
take.
that. I don't like selling t-shirts. I prefer to trade. I sold some when I dropped the first book just because I had extras and stuff that I didn't really need or want. I did a big sale with ProSell in New York, and like,
Nice.
I don't know if regret is the word, but that was before, kind of the boom of it. And I don't get any joy out of selling t-shirts. I get nothing. I I get nothing out of it. So
Okay.
it's not for me. And if I sell my t-shirts, it will be in a meaningful way, like as a group, as a as a thing.
Like a
There I might
historical artifacts, like something
it
that
yeah,
can be cherished.
it's an archive at this point. There's some extra stuff that I could get rid of over time. But when I think when we, at least for me, maybe it's similar for you. When I got into collecting this, I was a kid, and it was like going to Salvation Armies and thrift stores, and internet was not a thing yet, and eBay was certainly not a thing yet.
Yeah.
And it was just all about the dream of like finding, a Jordan jumpsuit or a Adidas three-stripe tracksuit, or like just finding it at the thrift store. So the idea that you would find that thing that you've looked for so long and then you would sell it, like I would never want to sell. Like it took me this long to find it. Like the idea of selling it didn't even cross my mind. There was nowhere to sell it. There was no platform, and also nobody would have paid me anything for it.
Yeah, for
Like
sure.
I was just finding this stuff for myself. It's not like, even in the beginning of Rap Tees, like, there were only a few of us looking for this stuff, and like we would duke it out on eBay sometimes for $100 or a couple $100, but like the only person to sell it to was each other for kind of the same price. So it wasn't like there was no motivation in that,
Yeah.
in the financial thing.
For the
So
longest time, rap tees to us were in the $100 to $200
yeah,
range
max
for
out
years.
300 was like the absolute top, and nobody was really paying it for a long time. Even when Procell and I did the pop up, we were selling bootlegs for $300. Wu-Tang boots and stuff like that. I mean, I know he sold a ton of stuff that he probably would love to get back, but that was kind of the market
That's
at the time.
wouldn't we all? Yeah.
And yeah, that's where it was. So yeah,
So
the
it's
money
interesting
side of it.
you say that you trademarked rap tees, which I think is a smart move. Now
Well, as much as I can, the logo. Yeah.
this term has become, you also mentioned like you created a label for it where then creates a market, because unless you can like talk about something and contextualize it through, because we think through language, then you're not like, there's nothing there really, right?
Hmm.
So the genre obviously needed to be like labeled and contextualized, but now rap tee, the term, can be used for many things. The bootleg style t-shirt, people call
Yeah.
rap tee style, right?
Yeah.
And there's so many tees that people call rap tees that aren't rap tees.
Yeah. I mean, I can clarify right now. Rap tees is not bootleg tees or parking lot tees. Like it was more about promos and merch and original hip hop t-shirts. The bootlegs are a part of that, but when I see people like, calling like a Tiger Woods t-shirt or whatever a rap tee, I don't care. But like, I
Yeah,
mean, that is
totally.
not the spirit of
Uh,
what it was created for. That's marketing, and that's like kind of gets back to like this weird kind of middleman t-shirt dealer thing that happened where like you have to create some hype, and it's almost like you just want to maximize your profit so much that it was a dark time. It was a good time for dealers, and like for me, it made me back away from the entire commerce side of wrap tees during the pandemic, all the sales and all the online dealing and stuff
Because
like that.
it makes it hard for a real collector to actually play in that market. It's like the prices are so inflated, and
It made it hard to collect. Luckily, I already have, a lot of the stuff, but it brings a lot of people who are in it, for purely financial reasons, and a lot of people who don't really know what they're talking about. And it does make it hard to deal with. I don't really like dealing with people like that either. I'd rather deal with people who've been doing this for a while and kind of have a real sense and appreciation for it.
yeah, fair
Um,
enough.
it kind of reminds me of like the Supreme, it was like a lot, the kids who like wait in line at Supreme were the ones who were selling rare wrap t-shirts for a while. And it's what's funny is now that the prices have kind of leveled out, you don't see as many of them anymore. It's just such a purely financial motivated or clout motivated situation.
Yeah,
Buy it for a certain price, post on Instagram, get some validation, and then try to squeeze as many cents out of it as you can, reselling it or trading it. Um, anyways,
yeah, no, you nailed that one on the head for sure. It
yeah,
is clout because those shirts are so sought after. I did a quick like search online before this interview just to see what values are, and the first one that came up was like um, a Nas tee, which I think the top sale on eBay right now for completed is like a Nas bootleg tee, which is actually fake for like $3,000, which is a
wow,
problem. There's two of them sold on there for like $3,000, and I've seen people posting that this is like the most faked shirt right now.
right,
Um, so that's another problem. Like there's crazy fakes coming out of the woodwork on all these bootleg
yeah,
styles, and they're really good. So you got to watch out for that.
yeah. I mean, I don't buy those anymore. The
Yeah,
parking lot boots style tees, unless I really know where they're coming from. I know the seller, I know the backstory. Um, One, they're not. It's not fun. I mean, it's not fun paying $1,000, $2,000 for a T-shirt
no,
for me for a T-shirt like that. There's no joy in that. So, um, and then the fakes, yeah, the fakes are really really good. Some of the fakes I've seen, and people write me all the time. I don't authenticate T-shirts. I don't give people values on T-shirts, but occasionally, someone will be like, "I'm gonna buy this," or I just got this or something, and I'll just have to say like, hey, this is really suspect, but don't write me. Do not, that's not an
do
invitation. I
not.
do
Yeah,
not want anyone asking me about your t-shirts. I don't care.
we don't want the
That's not
floodgates
not my
opened on
thing.
that, man. It'll just
Yeah,
pour in.
yeah, yeah, no, that's
So
not
on
fun.
that note, like what makes shirts special to you? Like when you're looking for something for your collection, you kind of just mentioned it, the promotional gear, like the album release or a show maybe, like what is it that you look for?
I look for artists that I love, artists that have meant something to me. Like I said, I'm really into the history of DJing and the history of hip hop, so things that have historical significance, some of the really early 80s teas. Um, that's the stuff that I get excited about now. And then like like an archive. So I'm looking to fill certain gaps where I'm missing, certain T-shirts and stuff like that, where I'm just still trying to find a good tee that I'm missing.
Yeah.
That's what got
Do you have any
harder.
specifics on top of your head that you could shout out here? Maybe someone will send you a DM and sell you a shirt.
No,
No.
I don't.
Okay. All right.
I don't. It doesn't. It does more harm than good to sort of like put it out there, but because it's not like even the shirts that I love, they're not necessarily like the most expensive T-shirts. They're all size small. They're all from like 1984, and like they don't fit anyone. And
Yeah, no, I hear
they,
you.
it's like the type of thing you're either finding that shirt for like $40 or someone's going to be like $4,000, and there's no in between. And it's exhausting to do
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
if you have something really
Fair.
cool, you can always send it my way, especially early stuff. I'm always, I'll check it out. But yeah,
So, this may be a naive question, but I've heard people talk about difference between rap and hip hop. In your view as a DJ, like, is there a difference there?
It's kind of like a nerdy hip hopper conversation. You know what I mean? I guess you could say hip hop is more of like a culture, that encompasses, you know, breakdancing and graffiti and rapping and DJing. That's like,
Yeah.
the KRS-One, school, and rap is like something you do. Rap is rapping.
Okay.
No, I mean, for all intensive purposes, like, when I'm talking about stuff, probably I'm saying hip hop because it's more encompassing the whole thing.
Yeah. Fair. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Let's kick it back. Let's kick it back to, like, I want to know about your history. You know, rap, hip hop as a culture, as music, is like a relatively new genre when you put it in the scope of music, right?
Yeah.
Um, like late, I guess, 70s, it was birthed, and then we saw the boom like through the 80s. That's the stuff that you're looking for, the memorabilia from the 80s.
And
You know,
70s. Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting because it is relatively new. And what got you interested in it? I know you're from Cincinnati. I want to know about, like, your childhood and how you got into DJing. And then also,
Yeah.
like, let's talk about, like, uh, rap and hip hop, like fashion, the uniform before, like, there was any brands that did anything for it.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot there. I mean, I grew up in Cincinnati. Like I said, my family is collectors. My mom's from Minnesota, so we spent summers up there, and a big part of our life was going to antique stores and doing the drive up north and hitting, like, all the antique shops along the way. And this was in the 80s, and it was a really
Nice.
fun time. So they were looking for like Minnesota stuff, fishing and hunting and duck decoys and ice
Nice.
fishing decoys and whirly gigs. I don't know if you know what that is.
I mean, I know the word, but what is it?
It's like a it's like a windmill, basically, like a folk art windmill. And a lot of times they would have like multiple moving components. So as the windmill turned, you'd get like somebody, sawing a piece of wood or
Yeah, I know
pouring a
exactly what
bucket or
you're
something.
talking about.
So that was, I mean, it was all kind of folk art, Minnesota folk art. And then, like, even here, like, this is like a fishing decoy, like this would be used for ice fishing.
Okay.
And this is the kind of thing, like, these were all handmade. This would have been put down the hole when you're ice fishing, and it would attract a big muskie or whatever, and then they would spear the muskie. It's pretty pretty brutal. It's all like brutal fishing and hunting stuff, but that's, it's Minnesota. But that's my memories of being a kid, was like stopping at every antique store on the way to the lake and looking for that and pottery. And then I found my own little things, cameras, and you get into it.
Yeah,
So
totally.
collecting was instilled early. In high school, I got into hip hop more, and more importantly than getting into hip hop was getting into like samples and digging for records, and that like touched the collector nerve. A lot of DJs have that, and so it's a very natural progression if you're a collector, that once you start learning about these records that are like have samples for your favorite artists, and then you start getting into all the original artists and how great that music is, that taps into that collector thing, and then you turn to
Yeah.
records. And like for myself and a lot of DJs, like, it's very obsessive collecting
So,
the
how
record
old were
thing.
you when you first got turntables?
16th birthday.
16th birthday.
Yeah.
And then
Juiced.
the record addiction was on from there, and you're finding all the funk
Yeah, it took a
records and
while. It took a while to sort of learn about the collecting like 70s records, and like jazz and soul and funk, because I was just kind of scratching, and I, like every kid that age, I saw Juice and wanted to like scratch and be a DJ. And then slowly but surely, like, you get your eyes open up to this older music. And then I was like working at the record shop, all through college, working at the record stores, basically working for trade. And that becomes like your first like big obsessive collection that you can actually use, which is great. You can actually play the records. And
yeah.
but again, the thought of like finding a rare record and then selling it, like, you spent all this time trying to find it, like, I would never want to sell it. And I mean, I was trading and trading for credit and stuff like that. But, similarly, the record store was like what you offer. It's like this meeting place, like it's something for the community. That's different than just sort of like being a middleman, just buying, posting, selling. It also gets you into this idea that like the place where you buy this stuff becomes a part of your life, the shops.
Yeah, I
And
like that.
and
I
that's
like
what I
that
love.
thought. I like that thought, especially when you're
Uh,
talking, Jesse and myself. Jesse was a DJ. He spun rap records and also drum and bass. So we were like in the rave scene in Toronto, also the hip hop scene. But you'd go to these stores in Toronto that were like music stores, but they would have T-shirts. They would like some of them would be
mhm.
more like on the electronic side, but we would also go to the hip hop stores, and those are the places that like they were the only places you could go to experience this stuff or buy this stuff or like get into this scene, right? So your record store that you worked at, was this like all music record store or like specific?
These were in Rochester where I went to college. No, they were like real deal, million records in the record store,
Yeah,
basement
okay.
full of records, like records. I mean, they would have T-shirts and CDs and all that stuff, but I was lucky to have two really great record stores right in the town where I went to college. So, kind of bouncing between those. I worked at both of them. Um, yeah, it's forms a community. It's honestly
Totally.
just kind of like how you spend your time. You're just there so many hours of the day digging around.
When
Um,
you started DJing, did you just teach yourself how to DJ?
mhm. Yeah, I mean, I'm from Cincinnati. There was no, there was no like, no one to learn from. There were like a couple kids who DJ'd, and DJ crews, but I wasn't really a part of that circle.
Yeah.
So, I was bad. I was just a bad bedroom DJ. And then when I went to college, I started doing more like house parties and little bars. I took like the very long road to becoming a working DJ. Like it took a long time. Practice.
So like your love for rap music, where did that come from? Obviously, like you worked in a record store, but like what was your first intro to it and your first memories? And was it always you um, DJing rap?
No, no, no. This hip hop. I mean, I fell for hip hop long before I started DJing. Probably like 11 or 12. It was like Public Enemy, right around 89 or 90. Public Enemy, Digital Underground was big. Um, both of those groups stood out because they both. I realized it later in life. A lot of that has to do with Flavor Flav and Humpty Hump. These like characters who were part of the groups who really appealed to kids. And I didn't realize it, but like as an 11-year-old, like what drew me to those groups was like these charismatic figures in the groups that like draw you in. And then you start listening, you start like listening to Chuck D, and like from there you get into everyone else affiliated. So yeah, that started when I was younger. And then the thing about living in Ohio is that access was always limited. So
Yeah.
you were always wanting more, pretty much your whole view into my dad's from New York. So I was lucky. We would go to New York every year and like at least be in New York City. But everything came from magazines or Yo MTV Rap. So you had these like very limited, like half-hour periods or like this magazine that pretty much informed you completely about what was going on in the center of hip hop. And again, that leads to just wanting more, and it leads to being a collector where you're always like searching for these objects that you only see and can't ever have. And I think being from Ohio is a big part of that, and just always wanting this stuff,
Yeah,
and not being
because
able to
it's
wanting a boombox more than anything in the world, and it just not existing, and you're every thrift store, every time you go to the Goodwill, you're like in the electronics section, like maybe today's my day where one turns up, and never does, but like that plants that seed. And then when eBay came around, it's a problem because the things become available,
yeah,
and
it's at your
then
fingertips.
you're like, oh, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Chuck D, does the foreword for your book number 2.
Yeah. Dream come
Uh,
true for that.
that's really cool, and he talks about a lot of things. He talks about how all the early T-shirts were made by fans, like drawn on T-shirts, and then the groups were making them, and then um, I think he says Run DMC was the first shirt that he ever saw. I want to talk about that because Run DMC also did the Adidas program, right? They had their whole line with Adidas in the 80s.
86, yeah.
Yeah, 86. And I was actually talking to Jess earlier about this. And then there was the Troop LL Cool J stuff. I guess, I don't know actually like the dates on that. But is it
87, 88, right
okay?
around there.
Yeah, that was one of our questions. Like, I guess Run DMC was the first one. And
Yeah.
it
Run
kind of
DMC
said,
first big brand sponsorship deal for an artist. Yeah.
and I think that was also even not just for rap music, but for music in general. There wasn't at that point like a lot of people doing, especially from a sports brand into music.
Mm-hmm. First, like, I think $1 million maybe deal or something, it was a big deal. And they did that. I mean, they created it by rapping about their sneakers. And then, Adidas caught on and said, wow, would make a great partnership. But already Run DMC like had everybody in their crowd holding up, their shell toes.
Yeah, super cool.
So they kind of created that just by dressing how they dress, and they sold a lot of Adidas Run DMC. So it was a great partnership.
Yeah,
That
because
stuff is great. And there's that stuff weirdly because they produced it. It's around. You might have to pay a few $100, but you can find a sweatshirt. Some of the
yeah,
T-shirts are tougher than others. They're all in rap tees. I mean, that
yeah.
stuff's awesome.
It's they were selling, like you said, they were selling Adidas by rapping about it way before their deal came up, and then like Adidas caught on and brought them on and made some kind of deal with them. But they were happily just rapping about it because that was their wardrobe, and
Yeah.
I think because this brings me to the wardrobe part, the uniform of rap music. Before there was any brands like Adidas that had a partnership with Run DMC, there was no brands maybe dedicated to this culture, right? No brands are putting out anything. So you had guys like creating a style out of what was available to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So like talk about that a little bit. Like, what did you see like before any brands were really catering? Like, what were these
Yeah.
people wearing?
I mean, according to people who were there, Run DMC was the first. Before that, you had like, Grandmaster Flash and these kind of guys in the early 80s who almost dressed like the Village People. They were coming out of the disco era and they were wearing like these really flashy outfits and feathers and stuff. And it was more like a performance outfit. And Run DMC was probably the first group who just dressed like they would dress on the street. They wore the clothes that they would normally wear. And that's why I think, the street loved Run DMC, and they kind of changed everything, and people really gravitated towards them as soon as they came out. And then I think it became, that's like when everything shifted, where it kind of became, even if you look at like the very first Beastie Boys pics, like they're dressed in like these kind of funny like Puma tracksuits. They look a little ridiculous. They're dressed like 1984 hip hop before Run DMC, and then kind of after Run DMC, they lose that. A lot of that is like Russell Simmons and the Def Jam guys, Rick Rubin, who kind of told them like, "Hey, you got to dress like yourselves," and like I think they saw before anybody. The Def Jam guys, I think, saw before anybody that like that old way of dressing and acting was out, and they were ready to usher in a new kind of era of like being yourself and making music for that you want to hear, that kind of thing. And that's where that big shift happened, and that's where you start seeing personal style. You see the Beasties, you see LL Cool J, stylish, and Run DMC, and then within like it's all happened so fast. This is like 84, 85, 87. You got Eric B and Rakim and guys who like are dressed dope, like great, some of the best dressed people. And then you got like the Dapper Dan era and kind of like the DIY custom suits, kind of like do it yourself luxury.
Bring in the
Um,
luxury. Yeah, totally.
yeah, but it's all. I mean, it wasn't actually going out and buying Louis Vuitton. It was making your own Louis Vuitton jacket.
Yeah.
So within the span of like probably 4 or 5 years, just like, I mean, this is how hip hop works. Every 4 or 5 years, like it's dramatic. The evolution is fast, and the reason these T-shirts are so rare is because hip hop discards the past. It is not for a long time. If you're old, you're out. You know what I mean? So the T-shirts go along with it. Everything kind of gets ditched for what's new. Less than in rock and roll, where people always like embraced the '60s and '70s all along the way.
That's interesting. So, yeah, you're saying that people don't hold on to these artists for long.
Yeah, even not no. Well, I mean, they might like the music, but like even if you look back when you're in high school, like the artist, someone you were listening to in, when you were 12, and you might be had a T-shirt. By the
Yeah.
time you're 16, that T-shirt's probably not in your house anymore. You know what I mean? Like you've moved on. You might even
Yeah.
be embarrassed to have been listening to it, because and that's how hip hop works. It's like you're on to the next new thing, and even now, it's like the older things. They almost it's not I don't know if embarrassing is the word, but you're kind of like you leave it in the dust for a minute, and it takes a while to go back and be like, oh, that was great. You know,
Yeah, like there's that point where it becomes nostalgia again after like a long period of time,
yeah.
but for a good portion it's gone.
And holding on. That's why when you find a T-shirt from like the mid '80s, like someone held on to that for a long time when it wasn't valuable. There was no value in it.
Yeah.
They couldn't. It's not like you're holding on to it to sell it, because until recently there wasn't going to be a benefit for that. A few bucks. So they are like it's cool to still see them out there.
So what was your first shirt when you were young? Do you remember your first rap tee?
My first my first rap tee was, well, I had a couple that were really memorable. There was a Beastie Boys T-shirt from Ill Communication. There was a Public Enemy Big Script tee, which was probably the most important T-shirt. And those were both artists who, because they had such good management and marketing strategies, you could find them in Ohio. They were for sale at the mall. Beastie Boys, um, Public Enemy, Ice Cube, a little bit. Like those things would be in like a local CD store in the early '90s.
Yeah,
So those were the first T-shirts, and those were just what I had access to at the time,
totally.
and my favorite group. So
Yeah, and that's a good interesting topic too because unless you're literally going to a show in New York, going to a show in LA maybe, you're only having access to what's available like in the mall in like a Stitches or not a Stitches but like a one of the gift shops or a record store,
yeah,
and
the
that stuff is
Camelot Music or whatever there was, whatever
and
CD store there was. Yeah.
exactly, and it's only the stuff that really made it like on the charts big time.
Yep, and guys who knew how
So
to merchandise. So there were only very few artists who really knew how to merchandise up until the mid '90s.
which again, I guess, kind of goes to play with the rarity of everything, and then also like the values on some of this stuff, where like it's super super low run. Like Beastie Boys shirts, yeah, there's tons of them, and it shows in the values. Like a lot of the Beastie Boys shirts that you think would be more are like still $200.
Yep, they're
Um,
great. I mean, it's a great buy, and it's a great group and a great T-shirt. I still pick them up. I won't pass by a good Beastie Boys shirt for a good deal because I mean, that's that's like really the stuff I'm after. That kind of stuff that was so important to me back then. Still hard to find good sizes,
it's true.
um,
Yeah, it
but
really,
yeah, they
like you
made a
said, the
ton.
'80s stuff was all tiny. The Screen Stars tees, really hard. I think I'd probably be like a double X in a Screen Star or like a triple X maybe.
Definitely double X for me. All those old Ched tags and screen stars, and that none of it fits. It's all snug. Big guys wore really snug tees back then.
Yeah. So let's talk about the book. Uh, the first book came out a long time ago. I think the first book obviously had such an impact on, like we talked about, the values, like people actually understanding what's out there and the breadth of this category. Um, have you talked to a lot of like artists? You know, obviously Chuck D did your forward, but have you talked to other artists who've like seen things in your books or like gotten excited that they've seen merch that they hadn't seen in years, or have you had conversations with other artists about it?
I have a lot of conversations with like the actual like design artists, you know, people who design the tees and design logos and stuff like that. Those are the best combos. A lot
Nice.
of people who are involved directly in the promotion and marketing side spoken to.
Okay.
And I know a lot of artists, you know, hip hop artists have seen the book, and I've spoken to a few. You know, everybody. It's hard to not have a good reaction to an old hip hop T-shirt. I mean, it like hits you in a special place, I think. So, yeah, it tends to get a good reaction out of fans of hip hop.
So
Um,
talk about some of these designers. Like who have you spoke to and what have they designed?
like Say Adams was an early Def Jam designer
Okay.
responsible for tons of famous logos and T-shirts. He's a real legend. Eric Hayes, I met with for the first book and spoke to him for a while. Guys like Eric Orr, who did Showbiz and AG logo and Strong City. I'm forgetting tons of people, but I talked to, you know, people who did like the Nervous logo, and it's like yeah, I've spoken to tons of tons of these
Yeah,
guys over, and
I
some
can
of them
imagine.
have become friends. You know, Shirt King Fade got from the Shirt Kings, who did all those legendary airbrush shirts.
Yeah, those
Um,
guys are still around, still doing airbrush from what I know.
still killing it,
Yeah.
still making airbrush tees, and all everybody's like great, and those are the people who you really make the book for, because they really, I mean, it gives them a spotlight, which a lot of them already have, but and they really react because a lot of these guys haven't seen some of these T-shirts in, you know, 30 years plus. So that's the most fun, is talking to them and the old promo people and
I
A&Rs.
imagine none of these, you know, nobody ever thinks they're going to design some logo for their job at a point that's going to go on to be like this iconic thing 40 years
Yeah.
later or 35 years later, you know, and then
Yep.
it must be quite, uh, you know, really cool for them to see their work like live on and be recognized and be part of the culture, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I talked to Stephanie Nash, who designed the Run DMC logo, and it was literally like, just make this logo for this 12-inch, you know, and once it was done, they saw it and snatched it, and they were like, "This is it," and probably the most iconic logo in music. You know, it may be the most famous logo in all of music, up there with like Rolling Stones. And it was just,
Yeah,
you know, it's these
for sure
simple
it is.
beginnings for it. And then you got Chuck D also, who I loved having him do the forward, because he is really like, to me, like the pinnacle of the guy who does everything, and has such a clear view for how to merchandise, how to brand your group while making great music, while making great art, but also just in terms of the design, the way he marketed it, everything about, you know, the way Chuck D operates is thoughtful, you know, and he always had the marketing and the T-shirts and all that in mind, and it shows, you know. I mean, with legendary T-shirts and logos, and just to be so hands-on, it's pretty impressive.
Were you friends with him or did you just happen to reach out to him to see if he would do
I,
this forward?
I'm still not friends with him. I'd love to. I reached out for the first book. It took me, you know, like 10 years to get Chuck D to do that. Just reaching out through, I mean, I've reached out to Chuck D through every person I know. And we have so many friends in common, mutual
I
friends.
bet, yeah.
And finally, kind of before this book, I was begging like his PR person or his, you know, someone in his management, and we made it work, you know.
Nice.
Um, but yeah, no, that was not easy. And that's the hardest part about, not the hardest, but one of the hardest parts about these books is when you want to start including quotes and things from artists, like tracking them down is takes years, a lot of times just to get a quote and get a little thing
Yeah.
or mention.
So, like, kind of like some nitty gritty on the book. Like, was it hard to make this book? I know that I mean, obviously, there's a lot of work that goes into this book. It's like so much photography. You're tracking down dealers to get collections. You want to like have certain shirts from different people. If my memory is correct, like I know you've been to Japan to shoot a lot of shirts,
Yeah,
or
many times.
many
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe talk about that. Talk about like the process of getting this thing done. And I definitely want to hear about Japan.
Book one was kind of a learning experience. I had a publisher on that one, so I was, working with their timeline. It's a ton of work. I do everything. I photograph everything, the layout. My man Press helped me with the initial layout for book one, which then I used for book two as well. But it's really like kind of a one man operation right now. So tons of work, tons of reaching out to people, shooting. You spend a lot of money buying tees, trying to fill gaps, and I want it to be as complete as possible. I wanted Rap Tees 1 to be as complete as possible, and it's pretty much there in terms of like Def Jam era stuff and like a lot of Native Tongue stuff, Run DMC. But as soon as that was done, like more stuff started coming in for book two, which book two I self-published. I wanted to have complete control and ownership over it. And it's just I started on Rat Piece 2 shortly after the first book, and that was 2015. So 7 years, 8 years of sometimes working on it at my own pace, picking up a tee and shooting it. And then for the last probably 2 years there, it's nonstop. That one went through COVID. So a lot of collectors were really cool about kind of shooting their own stuff. I'd try to give some direction. So there were some people who had to shoot their own tees, and then and overseas as well, just because I couldn't get there to shoot.
So after now doing self-publishing and having a publisher, what do you prefer? Like, would you continue to go with the self-publishing route?
Oh yeah, I'll unless the deal is really right, I will only self-publish from now on. There's good and bad to it. If you are a new author, like with the first book, nobody knew what Rap Tees was. So it's helpful to have a publisher and distribution because it gets into all the bookstores and you don't have to deal with all that. Financially, it's never going to be a great deal to make a book, no matter what. A book is a passion project. And if you're making a book to make money, a book like this, then you're off to a bad start from the beginning. You're probably going to lose money making the book. But it's not really about that. It's about like putting the whole collection in one place, getting it out there, and having some legacy for it. With the second book, you can make a little more money self-publishing, but that's only because I already had a big following and I was able to, kind of do pre-sale and kind of push it, and people were already wanting, they wanted more. So, but it's still, you have to put a lot of money up front. You have to do everything, it's a ton of work. You don't make enough money to make it worth it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not like a full-time job. This is a side project that takes up a lot of time, but it's really fulfilling. And even, we're wrapping orders here. I sent out probably 600 books in the first couple days there. So it was just like a production facility over here. And I really got a lot of enjoyment out of it. I got a lot of fulfillment out of like doing it from minute one till the minute the post office picks up, so
Yeah,
it's
I
been
mean
cool.
that's got to be the most fulfilling part too, when you're seeing people actually buy it. You're like, they're fucking with me right now, and they're investing in what I've worked on.
Yeah. And when you're proud of it, if I wasn't proud of it, it would be a different story, but a lot of work went into it. So
Yeah, yeah, I like that you
yeah,
say that. I
publishing.
think a lot of people out there have this assumption. Everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people in the vintage world talk about doing books, right? Everyone's got some idea for some new book, and there's a lot of great ones out there. There's great books out there, and they're all super valuable in some way for reference for us and who are into vintage clothing, right? But it is, there's not a lot of money in it. You got to really enjoy it. And you gotta have this as your passion, because this is even though it's growing a lot, it's still such a niche world that we're operating in here, right?
Yeah. Unless you have your own, unless you get like a great publishing deal, which you won't for your first book, because there's not a lot of money in books like in general. You know what I mean? Unless it like really takes off. But you're probably going to lose money making your book. Accept it, make it. That you're making something for yourself and for future generations. I, I didn't, I didn't lose money, but the book did really well. So like, but no, but I mean, let me take that back. Buying t-shirts to fill out this book, buying t-shirts I don't necessarily want, just because I'm like, oh, there's this gap here. No, even though no one cares except me, it's dramatic. You're spending a lot of dough and searching stuff down, and it,
Yeah. No,
it
I
doesn't
hear you.
help. It doesn't help with the obsession or the addiction. It feeds into it and it gives you another excuse, like, oh, I really need it for this one little
Yeah.
open spot.
Well, I think too, there's a lot of, like you said, like you have a collection, it's in bins, you talked about a bin that you'd save. So many people have collections in bins and they don't see the light of day often, right? So it's like somebody buys something for a collection, they enjoy it for however long they do, they put it in a bin, they put it away. It's there for this collection, but it doesn't get enjoyed. The book allows you to enjoy it and have it mean something beyond what it is going to be sitting in a bin.
Yep.
And I also think, like you mentioned, you got to make it for yourself. You got to make something that you like, and that's like with art in general, right? Like if because there's no guarantee in anything in life, but art especially, where you're like these artists want to produce something, you're producing it for yourself. You're producing what you like, and hopefully that resonates with people. And that's the same with music as well, right?
Same with everything.
Yeah,
Everything good, I mean,
everything good.
you do it on your own time and do it for yourself and not stress the money side of it. Which goes back to the beginning of our conversation when money is the goal. Different when you have a shop, like for you guys, but when it's just about squeezing every dime squeezing every little morsel of clout and money out of this like t-shirt, it's palpable. Like you can, for me, you can feel it right away for a lot of the sellers and stuff like that I was seeing online. That just kind of made me back off, a lot.
Yeah, I think about this concept a lot just in business, because yes, like we're a business, we got to make money, right? But we also, you got to think, we focus a lot on like the purpose, the vision, what we're up to beyond just the money, and the money allows us to get to that end. So it's like it goes hand in hand, but it can't just be the money. Like it can't just be some greed program, right?
I mean, it's way different. You have stores, like when you have a shop, it's like I was talking about with the record store. You're not just selling t-shirts. You're providing a space for people in the community. You're providing something more where like-minded people can get together. You're also
Yeah.
not just selling $2,000 t-shirts. You know what I
No.
mean? It's like the
No.
full spectrum, and there's no Instagram clout for selling, a regular ass polo t-shirt. You know what I mean? Or like a regular ass whatever, like
Yeah.
until the kids kind of latch on and they're like, oh, now this is what's cool. You're just going about selling vintage, just like you've probably always been doing.
Things
That's a
that
lot
people
different.
actually wear. Yeah, things that
Yeah,
people
that's
wear.
a lot
Yeah.
different. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a whole
Totally.
different. And for guys, for my community of hip hop, of vintage dealers, you've got like Varsity and Procel and Kirk out here for all the Envy,
Yeah.
people who kind of provide that. It's not just, and these guys are also hardcore collectors, and they've got their stash, all of them, of stuff that is what they're passionate about.
Yeah, and these guys are, quote unquote OGs in the game who have appreciation beyond, who are here pre the boom, right? Who've been through the ups and downs of the business in general. and are still out here grinding it out, right?
Yeah, they'll be there. They've been here and they'll be here for sure. And it's a lasting business model. You know, like I said, a lot of after the kind of COVID boom, you don't see nearly as much of this stuff on Instagram anymore. Just sort of the constant barrage of like, look what I found. At least I don't. Maybe it's because maybe it's because I blocked it all out of my algorithm or
Well, that's
whatever.
good because
Maybe you still get it, but, I don't know. I don't
I mean,
know.
I
It
think
feels like
it
it's
became
leveled out a little.
desensitizing to a degree, and that's one of the big downsides of COVID to me was that so much stuff is getting uncovered, COVID and then now, that like you've seen so much of everything that you're like, it's not exciting anymore. Like, what's going to excite me now? Because I've seen it all,
Right.
just because there's so many people posting it all the time. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I see like big scores of stuff pop up still and
yeah, it's wild. There's
big
stuff out
scores.
there. I mean, and on one hand, you're
There's
like, there's
still
stuff
stuff.
out there.
Yeah. I mean, those big like bootleg scores, I'm like that this is dry rot. Like this is dry rot city. I don't even want to find that.
Yeah,
Those things
totally.
scare the hell out of me. Every time I see those posts, I'm like, there's just no way. If it's been sitting in a box for 30 years,
Yeah,
there's just no way.
that
Like
is the
they just
worst.
fall apart. Yeah. So you,
So let's talk about some of the dealers. Like you mentioned a few just now.
yeah.
Give some shout outs to some other people who you've used collections in the book. Maybe some people you're friends with.
Uh, like I said, Kirk's always been a big contributor. Justin at Varsity, big contributor. Chico and Esco, kind of like a younger, the new breed of collectors. Those guys are great because they're hip hop nerds. You know what I mean? Like
Hell
they're
yeah, they
looking
are.
for their thing. They're selling other stuff on the side. They're really fair and like,
Those guys are rad.
you
Shout out
know,
Chico and Esco. We've known them for many years because of
yeah,
all
yeah,
our times coming to Cali, and they've done really cool installations and sort of exhibits and things like that with their
yeah.
collections.
They're in it for the right reason, and they're good dudes. So they have a bunch of stuff in the new book. Who am I forgetting? Purcell, obviously, in New York. Long time pal in this. Japan, there's tons of collectors who are the best, and they like live and breathe this stuff and similar mentality, just a real appreciation for a lot of the golden era stuff.
So yeah, let's
Um,
talk about Japan a little bit. So you said you went there many times. I know you went there for the first book, I think, and they were on it early, right? Before like values here became what they were. They were on it and they were buying it. Like we used to sell rap tees to them before anybody here really was like hot on it.
yeah,
And again, it just goes back to the infatuation with American culture in general, right? But talk about your experiences there. Like, who's into it? And
yeah.
sure, that
I
first trip
saw.
over there blew your mind.
Well, no, I started going for DJing long before rap tees.
Okay,
So, I mean, it's been my favorite place to go for since I first went.
nice.
When I started doing rap tees, it was cool because I kind of put out like a cold call in the community. Shout out to DJ Kango and Koya and the guys who used to do this club Harlem, vintage T-shirt collectors, and my man Hero who would bring me over. We kind of put out like a cold call, like Japanese collectors. I'm doing this rap tees book. We have this photo studio. Bring your stuff, and I'm gonna shoot it. Kind of not really knowing, what we were gonna get, but we just put it out there. And like, I don't know, it was like I have a photo. It's probably like 10 or 15 guys showed up with like garbage bags of like the craziest shit I had never seen before. I always knew Japan had it, but it was just like guys who I'd never met, never heard of, just emptying. My man Gunyara, shout out to him, just emptying garbage bags of just like crazy promos and all this great shit. So the first book has a lot of Japanese collectors stuff in there. And that was an eye-opening thing because I always would go vintage shopping in Japan, but there was never much because that stuff, as soon as it hits the wall, it sells. Like, there isn't the vintage shopping for hip hop is not very good over there because they're kind of past it and it sells fast and You don't find it that much. I think you have to be there when it comes in. It's expensive. Anyway,
Yeah.
that was a real eye-opening experience. So shot it all. I've been cool with all those guys since. A lot of them are on Instagram. They're they're just great collectors. They're super into it. And for volume two, some of them had to shoot their own stuff because I couldn't make it. But I've been back since, and I've shot a lot of their collections. We did like a wrap tees. I did a clothing line over there for a few years also. So that's like home base. Tokyo is like wrap tees home base. I found a lot of great tees over there. I'm always trading with those guys, and
So when was
yeah.
your first trip over there for DJing?
No, I don't know. It's probably like the early 2010s, I would want to say.
Okay.
Maybe I yeah, probably maybe I don't know 2011s. I mean, I'd wanted to. It was like I had to like secret that shit. Like I put it into the universe early. Like this is where I want to be, Japan. And it probably took like 5 years of like serious intention. Before I got over there. And since then, I've gone. I'd say at least once a year, minus COVID. Usually try to go like twice a year now. Um,
Nice.
and I also just love it. I mean, I just love the place. I love the country. So outside of vintage is a small part of what I'm into over there.
So do you spend much time traveling around? Do you ever like venture outside
Yeah, yeah.
Tokyo? And yeah,
Oh yeah,
nice.
yeah. We've been all over. DJing actually took me all over Japan. And then now when I go, we try to always we go to Kyoto a lot. Kyoto is like it's hard to not go there if we have time. It's just a really special place. Um, but yeah, been all over Japan, definitely.
So we haven't
Still
really
got to go
talked much
fishing.
about your. Yeah, yeah, you haven't been fishing there.
That's my next trip is going up north,
They
fishing
have
trip.
uh they have something called Tenkara. Is that right?
Tenkara, yeah, it's like
Te-
basically like a long rod, no reel,
yeah, it's just like
very
small river, dipping your line in the river, being very intentional with what you're up to. It's kind of
very
finesse.
traditional. Yeah, very finesse, very yeah, very sensitive fishing and catch big fish on it. But you got to have your technique has to be on point.
Yeah, I've only ever seen it. I've never tried it. Um, but yeah, so I'm a fisherman. You're a fisherman. You just did a trip. Were you in the Dolomites? Is that correct?
Dolomites, yeah,
Tell us
in
about
Italy.
that. That looked really really beautiful over there.
I got over there for DJing. My wife and I DJed a wedding in Venice, which was really cool.
So
And we
she
kind of
DJs
used it.
with you.
We DJ together. When we're lucky, we get booked together to DJ. She's DJed separately of me long, before I met her.
That's
And
amazing.
she has a clothing line, so she's really busy with that. But occasionally, we get booked to DJ together. This was one of those occasions. So it worked out. And we went to Rome and Venice, and then we went up to the Dolomites. And I always wanted to fish there. I follow a few fishermen on Instagram from the Dolomites. It was great. Big fish, no people.
Yeah. So
Nice.
you were on to them. You were catching river
Oh
fishing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I only fish river. I pretty much only fly fish now, and I prefer rivers. So yeah, amazing rivers. It's kind of best kept secret over there. But it was all trout, and yeah, that's another
Yeah.
hobby that I don't get to do enough.
So you talked about your parents. You're going to these antique store. You're talking about hunting and fishing. Obviously, like that. That's your childhood was fishing. I'm assuming getting into it
Yeah,
then. But
Minnesota. That was it. That was like all I cared about. Lake fishing though up there.
rod and reel, like traditional fishing.
Yeah, trolling around in a boat, walleye and pike and stuff like that.
And
And
then
then
how'd you get into the fly?
to be honest, through my wife. I had tried fly fishing a few times before, but my wife is a really good fly fisherwoman, and she'd been going with her dad for many years to Montana, and I managed to sneak on to one of those sacred trips, and like right away, it was like, oh, this is it. I mean, I liked everything about it. So then I got into like deep dive tying flies and going traveling a lot on my own to go fish and just got really into it. It was always like there. It felt like it was like a thing that was always inside. Like the bug from when I was a kid. I was so obsessed with it, and then I just didn't do it for many years. So as soon as that, it like unlocked something, and I was like, oh, this is something I should have been doing for the last 20 years. Like that I'm just now catching up.
I love that.
Um,
That's great. That's
yeah, but
uh,
yeah, she got me into it.
that,
She's great.
it
So she,
sounds like you are a lucky man. Your wife's a DJ. She DJs with you. She's a fly fisher woman. So
yeah,
that's
no,
very, very cool. You guys share a lot of
I,
similar
I
passions
struck the jackpot there for sure.
for
Yeah, we're
sure.
lucky. We have similar kind of lifestyles and similar travel schedule, crazy travel schedules, and it really works out.
That's awesome. Yeah, I look at fly fishing similar to you, where I got into it later on. Now that I'm in Squamish, and I look at it as like an investment into my future years. My later years. I'm like, I'm going to learn it now. I'm going to do it as much as I can, although I don't do it as much as I'd like to now. But I know in the future I'm going to do it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you're in the zone. You could probably drive a half hour and be on good water. So,
It's interesting here,
take,
though. We have a lot of rivers. We're at a river mouth. We have there's lakes, but there's not like there's steelhead if I want to go steelheading, but I haven't really ventured into that. That's like if that's a whole nother ball game that like I haven't even
once you go there, you like don't
you don't come
turn back.
back.
Is
That's
the
it.
problem. So, yeah,
So I have friends that do that. I actually have one friend who's like diehard. He ties his own flies. He's kind of like famous for certain flies that he ties, and he catches amazing steelhead. So I do fish it. We get the salmon runs, which is fun, but that's different. And I'll do some lake fishing here. And I've traveled a bit. I've gone fishing in Colorado, which was really fun. Good rivers there. And I do prefer the rivers for sure. Like something about
yeah. Was that like
walking.
Aspen area
It
when you
was
went? Or
Crested Butte actually.
okay,
And I got a guide. That was like really cool to get a guide and then have them like take you, and you learn a lot in a day with a guide.
it's on a new river. If you want to catch fish, you know what I mean. Like
Yeah.
it's a smart move to at least get the lay of the land, and it's usually a pretty good investment to get a guide for a day and on a new river for sure.
So
Um,
do you get do you drive anywhere in California to fish?
no, not really. There are rivers within a few hours of here, but I really don't get out nearly enough. I go to Montana usually once a year, and like I've had some gigs in like Aspen, so I'll fish the Roaring Fork or the Frying Pan out there, and sometimes when I work in Vegas, I would shoot up to Reno and fish the Truckee. Just like I had like a little rotation, but almost everything involves a flight, so it's not
Yeah.
convenient. In New
Well,
York, you could drive upstate and fish when I lived there.
yeah, I'd say it's super overfished too. I've been to Mammoth and there's the rivers around there. It's you can
Yeah,
see fish, but you can't catch them. They're just so desensitized. They're so overfished there that
yeah.
we didn't catch shit that trip. To be
Yeah,
honest.
it's tough when it's crowd. I don't want to see people either. You know what I mean? It's like I just want to kind of be alone out
Yeah,
there. So
that's the
you got to
joy.
travel for that.
Totally.
Yeah,
Uh,
another addiction.
yeah, 100%. 100%. So I want to jump into more DJ talk. Obviously that's your main gig, that's your livelihood, that's what you do for a living. How did it progress? You said it took you a long time to get to Japan. Like, sort of tell us the progression of you as a DJ.
The short version is I went to college in Rochester, and that's where I did like house parties and bars. And then I moved to New York after that, that New York City, and then I did more like little bars and $50 gigs, $100 gig, just like record money and cab fare basically.
Yeah.
I was in school at the time, and then just slowly but surely started, working up to like slightly better venues, and then caught a couple lucky breaks that like put me in better rooms, but like not on the good nights, and just like grind it out for like years and years, opening DJ for people and just getting better and building the record collection, and then I got some good opportunities in New York, and then I got a really good opportunity to DJ in Miami, and I went down there and DJ'd, and kind of on that trip, the owner of the club made me an offer to move to Miami. He was like, I want you to work like 4 or 5 nights a week down here, but you got to move
Wow.
here. And I was living in New York, loved New York, been there for many years at that point. But the offer was just too good. And then I moved down there, and then I was working at like really big, massive, serious, real deal clubs. And then all of a sudden, like the people in New York, the places I was like opening, kind of like a, second string DJ, they wanted me as a first string DJ at that point. So that kind of opened up New York and Vegas because I was doing these great clubs in Miami. And it was just a lot of, practice and putting in the time and then getting lucky and like sort of being ready, when those opportunities arose to, being prepared. And that was it.
Yeah.
That's kind of the story. It's not like there's no shortcut to it.
Was
That's
there
for
a point,
sure.
like, were you working jobs up till a point, and then was it till Miami that finally you were like, I can do this full time? Or
I mean, I was pretty broke, like I was in school and I went to photo school in New York City. I was in grad school. I have a master's degree in photography, and I was working for photographers, printing and doing like archiving and stuff like that,
okay,
working for galleries. So it was always a bunch of odd jobs, but that was in the kind of early 2000s, and DJing, for money, and I was living a really simple lifestyle, living with a bunch of my friends in a loft in, pretty wild conditions. So my expenses were low. The lifestyle was great, but it was not, adult. So
yeah, fair,
at Miami, when I moved to Miami, I actually got a place down there, and that was kind of the shift.
nice.
Uh,
What's the secret? Like, what for you? You're saying in Miami you play like these big clubs. You play weddings, right? Weddings. Everybody, like, there's a vibe you got to get going at a wedding. Like, what's the secret to a good party?
the secret to a good party, well, it's first of all, you got to know who you're playing for and like what the party is, and you got to kind of play for that crowd. You got to find a way to like stand out and be unique in your own way, but also play for the room, for the stuff I was doing.
Yeah,
I was doing like big, bottle service clubs, and this was not, I'm here to educate the crowd, or I'm here to like keep it real or anything like that. It was like, keep these people here. That's still what I do. Keep these people here until the lights are on, spending money and dancing and having a good
dancing
time.
and having a good
So
time. Yeah, totally.
so you kind of check your ego a little bit, and you just do what it takes. You're playing all the current music and keeping up to it and trying to make yourself stand out from the other DJs in the field. And I had kind of a unique thing in Miami. I played a lot of Brazilian music. We had a night that was like a little bit more, had a kind of a Brazilian edge to it. And at that time, you were playing like a lot of house and hip hop. And so it was all about how you kind of like maneuvered through Southern hip hop and dance music and all that kind of thing. So the secret, I think, go listen to a bunch of DJs, make your own style, put in your time. Now there's a whole new social media element to it that you got to get good at. But
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
now is a different world out there. So now the advice is a little different. Now it's more carve your own lane, start your own party, build your own network. That's the secret to success in 2024. More than back then, there were more clubs and you could be a working club DJ a little easier.
So
Those
is
days are
that is the clubs aren't thriving like they once were, or they're just not? There's
yeah,
not.
a lot less clubs. Less clubs. The rates have gone down a bit. A lot more DJs. It's way more accessible to be a DJ now.
Yeah,
Um, Hungry DJs, willing to work for less, and so it creates good DJs willing to work for less. You know what I mean? So it kind of creates a thing where you spend a long time, like, kind of building sort of rates, building this thing, and then especially after COVID, that kind of like wiped the playing field on that a little bit. So now it's more, for me, it's more event driven, still clubs, and kind of finding my own lane in that.
nice.
Yeah, there's no good advice right now. It's grind it out and get
Well,
yourself noticed, and
there's some nuggets in there for sure. The
yeah.
the and when it comes to the music for you personally, I want to know your take on this current sort of genre of rap music that we're in, right? Like
Mhm.
hyper pop. Some people say mumble rap, trap. What's your take on that? And I guess like what are you currently excited about that's been coming out?
Um, I kind of try to reserve judgment on that stuff. A lot of times the knee-jerk reaction is kind of like, oh, this is bad and lazy, and I don't like whatever. But you got to kind of listen to kids, and understand that some things maybe the audience is a 17-year-old for it. And a lot of times, like with the kind of the mumble rap stuff, I like a lot of it. I play a lot of it. A lot of it, I kind of see it as stepping stones to whatever is going to come next, So it's very easy to just knee jerk and be like, I don't like this. And it's fine to not like it. It's fine to it's fine to not want to listen to it. But, there's a difference between not liking it and then just kind of like hating on it and dismissing it for nothing. So I've had to learn to just kind of follow the kids on that, kind of listen and sort of trust, where they're going. I have my own personal preferences and personal tastes. New music, I like fun party music, like I want more party shit. I want more rap music for girls, I like a lot of rap music by girls right now, to be honest. Like it's more fun and less like nihilistic and I mean, a lot of the new hip hop is really super dark shit, and like I think it's real. It's a sign of the times. It's a sign of what a lot of people are going through, and it's really dark. But
Yeah,
so but for me, I'm a club dude. I like fun rap. I like making people dance and energy. So
yeah.
I'm always looking for that stuff. That's
It's
what I
a
want.
it's a it's a good take. I think like when you're playing a club, you got to keep the energy moving. Not you don't want to. Yeah, you got to bring it up, not down. Right.
Yeah, for me, that's what hip hop's always been about. From the beginning, it's about like a party. About having fun. Um, Not that all music has to be, not hip hop has to be fun at all. But I don't know. That's why I want more of.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I have to talk about your squirrel friend here for a minute.
Finally, something interesting. Earl the
So
squirrel.
you have a squirrel that comes and hangs out with you and eats nuts or whatever you feed it. How did this happen?
Earlita.
Earlita.
Earl's a member of the family at this point. She's a wild squirrel. She's runs the neighborhood, and we started hanging with her like, I don't know, maybe it's probably almost been 5 years now. She would come
Wow.
around to like our bird feeders back then, and she just wasn't scared of us. And over time, we like kind of formed a relationship with this squirrel, and she just wouldn't run away early on, and then we kind of started giving her some nuts and stuff, and now it's like a daily thing. Like she comes by and says what's up, looks at us through the window, and kind of waits for us, and then goes about her way. Goes on with her day. She's like, we get 5 minutes of hang time, and then she's like, I'm going back to the tree, and getting out of here. She's had babies. We've had a whole long saga. I might have to make a whole video about our saga with Earl because we've been through it with her. Makes us feel the full run of emotions.
That's
Um,
amazing.
that's
I
what it's like having a wild animal as a friend. They put you through it sometimes.
Yeah, well, that's it's cool to see. I just recently started seeing you more with your squirrel, and I think it's I want a squirrel friend to be quite honest.
You should. They're the best. Now we got like her. She had babies recently, and they're coming around, and like there's some other squirrels coming around, but Earl's the one. Um, so yeah, I recommend it. Everybody hits me like, "What's the secret?" everybody's like, what's your secret? Like, how do you make this happen? How do you get a squirrel to do this? And I think we just got lucky. She's one of a kind. So
Yeah, no, that's super cool.
yeah.
Okay, so we're getting close to the end, but here's volume 2. If you don't have this, you need to go cop it. You can cop it on Ross's website, raptees.com.
.us.
.us, sorry. You can grab it at our stores. We stock them in F as in Frank. I kind of got them because I like providing that service to other vintage dealers or people that are interested to like have those reference materials, because unlike Japan, there isn't a lot of reference materials in North America, or at least readily available.
Yeah.
For
There's
us
not a lot of reference material over there either. I mean, there are, there's the Lightning magazines and stuff like that, but yeah, I'd love to see more books about kind of niche collections.
Do you have any other favorite books that you know of? Like, do you want to shout out any other books?
I'm sure there are. I'm kind of drawing a blank right now. Just looking at my shelf. My
There definitely
boys
isn't
just did
any
these
hip hop specific.
like vintage books. There's a bunch of good ones out there. I mean, there's some really good punk rock books. I can't remember the names though. I've have them all. There was like some
Yeah, I got
good like
quite the
small
collection.
publisher.
But yeah, I recommend copying books if you're into this stuff. If you're listening to this podcast, you're obviously into vintage, so definitely go. Don't be cheap. Cop some books because they're super valuable. Like when I'm bored, I'll just pick up one of the books, scroll through something, see something that I forgot about. It keeps things at the top of your mind too, which I believe in manifestation. It's kind of important.
Manifestation. That's how you get to Japan. That's how you get all these places. And also, I mean, that Rap Tees Volume 1, I don't have any control over the printing of that book, unfortunately. But when it went out of print, it went a little bit crazy for a minute there. It was selling for a lot of money, and then it got reprinted, which, like I said, that's out of my hands. But Volume 2 is in my control, and probably when that's gone, it's going to be gone. So those books, when they do go out of print, they become tough to find.
So do they even let you know when they're doing another print run of the book number 1?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like things to be like done and then collect. Like I'm very, like I said, like the financial element isn't like the big factor for me. So I would prefer to have a book be out of print and a special thing than just always available. But yeah,
totally.
if you want control over that, do your own self-publish. Because if not, it's like a record deal. You're at the mercy of someone else. But it's a good problem to have. Most people, if you get your book reprinted, it's a great thing. So
yeah,
that means it's sold out. There's demand.
Yeah, control the market. So
control the market.
Thank you very much for coming on. Is there any final words, any last minute shout outs before we hop off this call?
No, man. Thanks for having me. Shout out to Earl the Squirrel.
Shout out to Earl.
Yeah, these dudes who've been doing it since day one, like I pretty much all know who you are. And
yeah, totally. In the back of the book, there's a list of every contributor, and there's some real ones in there. So,
oh yeah, shout out to obviously, shout out to everybody who contributed to the book. There's a lot of contributors this time. The book has a ton of t-shirts in it. Volume 2 is crazy. Volume 2 is a lot of serious stuff in there.
Great book, great work.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ross, and everyone else. We'll see you on the next one.
All right. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. Much appreciated. If you want to support the show, you can jump on the Patreon. There is hundreds of podcast episodes on there, full 2-hour episodes. you will learn a lot and it will help you make money. Also, we are now starting up the VMMG Vintage Mastermind group again, where we are going to start having weekly meetups, accountability check-ins, and all kinds of fun stuff on the group. So jump on the Patreon link down below. It's just $5 a month and you get a week free trial anyway. So there is no excuses why you should not jump on the Patreon. Or you can sub here on the YouTube. But yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it. Make sure you like the video, sub to the channel, all that YouTuber crap. That's it. I'm out. Peace. See you on the next one.